I'm Bob, I'm an alcoholic. Glad this is the last hour because I don't know how much further I can go on. I've had a good time here. I'm delighted. My wife, she was able to come with me, and we do a lot. We travel together. We do a lot of great things together. She's my partner, and that's something I always wanted to. I could share this life in Alcoholics Anonymous with someone, and she is a tremendous example of AA. Sponsors a ton of women, and she has gals she sponsors here. And this is all possible because the journey never ends. You know, it's real easy to assume or feel like you're kind of done here when you've made all your amends and you're like, I'm good now. But there's a warning in step 10, and it says that we're not cured of alcoholism. And it says that it's easy to let up on this program of spiritual action and rest on our laurels. It really is. And it says we're headed for trouble if we do. For alcohol is a subtle foe. It's so subtle that when alcoholics die of alcoholism, they don't know that it's alcoholism sometimes at all or until it's too late. So I keep active in this thing. I try, and I don't do it very great. Sometimes I do a pretty good job, sometimes not so much. Step 10 and 11 together are the growth and maintenance steps. They're both. I think to be an alcoholic it's almost like being a shark. If you've ever studied marine biology, sharks are designed by God that they have to keep moving forward or else they suffocate and die. They're designed in such a way that they have to keep forward motion to keep water flowing over their gills to oxygenate their blood. That's why if you go out in a night dive, you will see sharks that sleep with involuntary tail motion. They sleep in the deep blue and they got to keep moving forward. Because if they stand still, they're not oxygenating their blood and they suffocate and die. And I think that's very much the case for me. I have to stay involved here. I do like a lot of us do, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, sometimes 1 step forward, 2 steps back. But over the course of time, we seem to get better, and we seem to grow along some spiritual lines. I believe that I'm the better version of myself today than I was 5 or 10 years ago, and I don't know what God has in mind. But sometimes you regress. Sometimes you get worse, and then you get better. So I try to stay active, and one of the great directions that Bill gives us is to pause when agitated. And I think that is such a perfect thing because most alcoholics of my type are spring-loaded. We don't pause when we're agitated. We accelerate, we attack, we get excited. And to pause when agitated. And excitement is a type of agitation. So I get excited sometimes. I'm more prone to stepping in it when I'm excited than I think when I'm depressed or afraid, because excitement is like a drug. So we pause when we're agitated, excited, afraid. Turn to God. These are hard disciplines to put into your life if you're like me. And so, I've been working with this stuff for a lot of years, and I still, if I'm honest, I still feel a great deficiency in my 10th and 11th step, especially 10. And when I got sober, there was we weren't we didn't have a big book consciousness in the 70s. So it was common that step 10 was something you did at night before you went to bed, when you retired at night, which is actually a part of step 11. But back in the day, we just thought that was step 10. We didn't know any better because we hadn't really studied the book yet. It hadn't come out yet. I mean, the book was out, but Joe and Charlie hadn't come out. They hadn't shined that light into the book that they started shining in there. And so my first sponsor just said, you do your step 10 at night, just look over your day, what could you have done better? If you have some amends to make, you make them the next day. And that was what we did. But in actuality, in the big book, step 10 is something you do in the moment. You do it, you don't wait, you do it right now. And you do 5 things. When agitated, I try to identify, what is it? Is it fear? Is it resentment? What is it? What aspect of self is risen? I ask God at once to remove it. I discuss it with someone immediately, which if it's embarrassing could be 2 months. But I discuss it, the direction is discuss it with someone immediately, make amends quickly if we've harmed anyone, and then to turn our attention back to our primary purpose, someone we can help. And the beauty about step 11 in its nightly review is that I often suspect Wilson knew about guys like me, that we just let stuff fall through the cracks. You know, I don't pause when agitated. I'm too busy. I don't do the 5 things when I've done something wrong or I've been excited or afraid or resentful. I don't do what I'm supposed to do. And so at night, we constructively review our day. And that's where we catch the things we missed. If you ever go to large cities with big skyscrapers, it's not uncommon to see people working on the 70th floor, maybe changing the windows or the facades or the parts of the building out. And underneath where they're working, they put some nets. Because if you drop a hammer from the 70th floor, it can do a lot of damage when it hits the ground. And then if you look on the bottom couple floors, there's usually a couple scaffoldings with more nets, because they know that stuff can get through the first net. And so it's a backup. And I think when we review our life at night, that's the backup. Because I think Wilson suspected there'd be guys like me that are busy. I should stop and I should do those things, and I understand, but I got to return this phone call. I got to go. I got to. And I'm one of those kind of guys. When I got something I got to do, I got to do it. And so I don't pause. I don't do the 5 things that the book suggests. And there's nothing of any value that seems to happen in a sense of urgency or quickly. That's why pausing is very, very important. And in the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, Wilson talks about restraint of tongue and pen. If I could have practiced that more often, I think I would have saved myself a lot of problems in my sobriety. Because I say things sometimes that once you say them, you can't take it back. It's like, and did I mean to do harm? No, I didn't. Did I do harm? Yeah, I guess I did. So if I could pause more often and be more mindful of the things I do and say, I think my life would be smoother. And so in this 11th step, there's some great things in there. One of the things that it talks about, we're careful never to pray for our own selfish ends. And I think one of the distinguishing factors about this spiritual movement of Alcoholics Anonymous, as opposed to a lot of churches and other spiritual movements is the word only in step 11. We pray only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. We don't suppose, we don't presume, we only try to align our will with God's. And so there's, my sponsor Clancy for years, we used to talk about this quite a bit. He was not a big fan of certain prayers. The kind of prayers where you're asking God to do something for you, where you're telling him what to do. Because he says it's in contradiction to the word only in step 11. Only is amazing because it kind of signifies that we know something. We know we don't know. So we're not going to tell God what to do. I'm not asking him to do stuff. I'm not trying to align his will with mine. I'm trying to surrender my will and align it with his. It's give up. Pray only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. That's an amazing proposition when you think about it. Because most religions don't do that. If you get those televangelists, they're always telling their people to pray for abundance and health and all kinds of stuff. We don't do that in AA. We know we don't know. Just pray for God's will. But what if it's not right? Let's find out. Let's just pray for God's will. See what happens. And what has been real in my life, truly, and I don't do a great job of aligning my will with God's, but I make efforts to do it. And what I've discovered over time is that God's version of Bob and God's version of Bob's life is better than any of my versions. That I'll take what he gives me because what he has given me so far has been better than anything I could have desired or orchestrated. And I guess it brings me back to the reality of I don't know. One of my favorite Buddhist stories is about this little old Chinese farmer, and he's very poor, and he lives on this meager piece of land that's owned by a lord. And he lives there with his son, and they work hard in the fields, and they have to tie the majority of their crop and the harvest to the Lord for the privilege of working in the fields and living there. He doesn't own anything. He doesn't own the house. He doesn't own the tools. He doesn't own anything. But he does have one thing. He owns one possession, and it's this horse. Very proud of this horse. It's their whole estate is this horse. Well, one day, the son is out there trying to fix the corral, and the horse runs off. And virtually, he lost everything. He lost his whole estate, just ran across the valley. So his friends and his family and neighbors come over to console him, to tell him, this is horrible. You lost the one possession that you had that was worth something, and it's gone. And the little old man doesn't respond. He just says, I don't know if it's awful. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. And they just think, wow, this guy's weird. And a couple days later, the son's back out fixing the gate in the corral, and he hears this loud noise, and he looks up, and there's a whole herd of wild horses running down the valley, being led by the horse that ran away. And his horse leads them all into the corral. He just closes the door. He just hit the horse lottery. Now he's one of the richest men in the valley. And of course, his friends and family and neighbors come over to congratulate him, tell him this is amazing, this is wonderful. And he just shrugs his shoulders and says, I don't know if it's wonderful. Maybe it is, and maybe it isn't. And they just look at him, and you have all this wealth now, and you don't think it's good. And he just kept saying, I don't know. A couple days later, his son is trying to break one of the wild horses, and he's thrown, and his leg is crippled up pretty bad. And he can't walk, and he can't work. And of course, his friends and family and neighbors come over to console him, to tell him how horrible this is that his son has been crippled up like that. And he just looks at him and just says, I don't know if it's horrible. Maybe it is, and maybe it isn't. And they think, oh my God, your only son has been crippled up, and you don't even think that's bad. And he just kept saying, I don't know. Maybe it is, and maybe it isn't. The next week, the Chinese army would come through the valley and force all the young men to fight in a battle where none of them would survive, and they couldn't take the son because of his leg. The little old man knew the most important thing he'd ever know. He knew he didn't know. It's one of the views of enlightenment, to know the most important thing you would ever know is you don't know. And we don't know, so we seek only God's will for us. And we trust. And the whole thing about, often Alcoholics Anonymous is accused of being a faith-based program. And I understand why people say that, because it kind of looks that way. But it's not. It's an action-based program. Faith for us isn't enough, because we are tasked with something that's more than faith, to trust and rely upon God. And that's a whole different thing from having faith. If you could have all the faith in the world that there are police out there on the streets, you can get in your car, that faith in that the traffic laws and the police may affect your driving, and that's faith, the idea. You get a cop in your rearview mirror with his lights on, you got some conscious contact. You got something that's real. And one of the things I love about Alcoholics Anonymous is its pragmatic approach to spirituality. It's practical, it's pragmatic. And what we know over the course of time is God's vision of us is better than ours. How do we know that? Because when we let Him, when we trust and rely upon Him, good things happen to us. And it's hard. If you're as full of fear and obsessive self-concern as I am, trusting in God is not always easy. And yet, it's always the path, the best path to take. So my goal in my life is to trust God more, listen to my head less, serve more, forget myself more. Do those things, because that's what makes life good. I want to talk a little bit about step 12. We've kind of run out of time, and Wilson calls it our primary purpose. In the 12 steps and 12 traditions, in step 12, he calls step 12 the joy of living step. I've often thought about that. What did I ever know of joy? I don't think I truly ever experienced joy. I experienced excitement when I'm about to get my way, but joy, just that thing that bubbles up inside you because you're just glad to be alive. You're glad for the people that are in your life. You're glad of you received the gift and you know it, and you're mindful of it, and it's joyous. There's a line in the book where it says that we think. This is one of the few places where it talks about what we believe God wants, His will for us. He says we believe He wants us to be happy, joyous, and free. Well, as an alcoholic, coming to Alcoholics Anonymous, I was not happy about anything. And I was not joyous, and for God's sakes, I was not free. I was locked up inside of me with all these crazy emotions and thoughts. So God wants us to be happy, joyous, and free. I think there's only one person on the planet that doesn't want that for me. That's me, evidently. Because if you looked at all the times I've made myself unhappy or unjoyous or unfree, I'm the guy who did it. And so I try to trust and rely on God and take my part here. I have a role to play. It's been given to me by Alcoholics Anonymous. It's been given to me by God through AA. because he works through the fabric of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's to help his kids. In the beginning of the chapter, Working with Others, it says something that's very astute. It says, nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. It works where all other activities fail. I had a great sponsor. He did a lot of 12-step work. He was all about helping drunks. And boy, he pushed me into that. And I didn't want to do it. I just, because it's kind of inconvenient. You know what I mean? It's just, First of all, I don't like people. So it's hard to want to help someone if you don't like anybody. It's like, But he kept pushing me to do it. And I resisted it. I remember I just got out of detox and he's starting to hammer me about, I want you to be one of the guys taking the panel back into the detox. I want you to get on the 12-step list. I want you to help people. I want you to look for newcomers. All this stuff, help. Oh my God. So it was too much, just too much. And I said to him, well, I hear what you're saying, but don't you think I should work on me for a while? And it looked like he bit into a lemon. He got this ugly look on his face. He says, work on you? You've done quite enough of it. Stop it. And I had spent my whole life trying to make Bob happy. I've spent my whole life working on me. And I was miserable. And so he wanted me to abandon myself to this work in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I didn't do it easily, but I took the actions. And the funny thing about spiritual actions, they don't get traction immediately. I mean, they do, but you don't realize it for a while. And I'm doing a lot of 12-step work. I'm doing panels in the treatment centers, but I'm still not right. I haven't worked the steps yet out of the book. That didn't happen until I was 4 years sober, where I did my first 4-step out of the book. So I'm busy. I'm going to like 15 meetings a week, I suppose. I'm trying to outrun my alcoholism. I had a lot of commitments. I had a lot of detox meetings I was going to. And it was buying me islands of freedom from me, basically. And I appreciated that. But not completely, because I hadn't put all the other pieces of the puzzle together yet. And I remember coming home one night, and I just came home. I just wasn't doing well, not at all. And I had a depression kind of circling me, that I'm sitting there just pondering my life. It's not good. And there was a meeting not too far from my apartment, and I thought if I could get to that meeting, maybe I'd hear something at that meeting that snapped me out of this. So I go to the meeting, and the problem when I'm spiritually sick, I'm disconnected from reality. Because when I'm spiritually sick, what's going on in reality out here, what you're sharing in a meeting or etc., is like music in the doctor's office. It's distant because the big show's on the inside. This is loud, this is faint. And so I'm in the meeting and I'm not really hearing anything because I'm thinking. I'm thinking about my problems and my chronic dissatisfaction with my life and my depression and my emotions, and it's just bad. But there's a guy sitting across from me who's coming off a drunk and he's in bad shape. He's doing something that I used to do when I was coming off a drunk. He's sitting there grabbing himself like this and rocking back and forth. I used to do that. And then he's sick and he gets up and he's pacing back and forth in the back of the room behind the row I'm in. And he goes into the bathroom intermittently and he's in there throwing up. He's got dry heaves. And I have a lot of problems and I'm trying to figure them out. This guy's annoying the crap out of me, really. By the end of the meeting, I don't feel any better. I actually probably feel worse because it was one of those meetings where I think the subject was gratitude or something. It's not. Do you ever go to a meeting when you're depressed and the subject gratitude? You just wish you had a machine gun, Well, I stay after to help this guy, Charlie, who's the secretary, to clear up the trash and set the chairs back up in the chapel. And Charlie and I are the last two guys to leave the meeting. And this poor guy who's detoxing, he's coming off this bad run, he's laying on the ground near my car. I would just about have to step over him to get in my car to go home and ponder my life more deeply, which is what I wanted to do. And Charlie's there. Charlie has to go to work, and Charlie says, "You going to help this guy?" I don't want to help him. But Charlie's got a big mouth. And if I don't help him, Charlie's going to tell everybody what a crappy AA member I am. So I go over to him, and he's a mess. He's peed his pants, and he's shaking it out, and he's afraid he's going to have a seizure, and he doesn't know what to do. And it was at a time in Las Vegas, I don't think you've ever had this situation here where you can't get to there's no detox. We had a period of time in Las Vegas where if you didn't have insurance or money and you needed a detox, you were out of luck. We used to detox people in our house, in our apartments, in the living room. I've had guys have a seizure in my living room because I'm trying to detox them and give them like a little thing of vodka with orange juice every hour or so, hoping they don't go into seizures, and sometimes they would anyway. But I can't do that because you kind of need two guys to sit with someone around the clock. And so there's a county hospital, and it was called Southern Nevada Memorial Hospital. It's now called University Medical Center. And they get some government money, so they have to take some indigent patients that can't afford nothing, that don't have insurance. But they don't like it. I've been up there before with 12-step calls, and they treat you just like you have leprosy. They don't like alcoholics because they'll bypass you, leave you sit there, and treat people come in after you because they have this attitude about alcoholics and we'd rather treat legitimately sick people than these self-induced people that are probably going to be back here next month anyway. So I get this guy in my car, and I know what I'm in for because I've been there before. And I'm driving up there, and I'm not happy about this. And I get into the waiting room, and we're sitting in there, and this guy starts to open up to me. And he's telling me about how he, for some time, he just wished he had the courage to kill himself. He said that he couldn't even drink away the shame anymore and the remorse, that alcohol stopped doing that for him. And then he said, this really got me. He said, "I don't know why you're wasting time with me. I'm not like you. I always drink again." And he's saying that to a guy who just tried to commit suicide on his last run, who couldn't drink away the shame and the guilt anymore, and relapsed year after year after year. He's telling me my story. And somewhere in the middle of the night, I fell in love with the guy. And I wouldn't have identified it as that, but I know what it felt like. It felt like he was important. Like his well-being, how he's doing is more important than how I'm doing, which when I started the evening, how I was doing was more important than anything on earth. And now he's more important than how I'm doing. And I eventually gave him a bed in the county hospital. They were going to detox him, and I said I'll come back, which I did, and he wasn't there. He was gone. But I remember driving home. It was wee hours in the morning. I mean, the sun's starting to come up, and I just felt so right. I mean, it's like there's no deficiency here anywhere. Everything is just right. And what had changed is that this guy had relieved me of the bondage of self, and I didn't even know that had happened. And what had happened is in a peculiar way, I fell in love with this guy for no self-serving reason. He can't do anything for me. He's probably not even going to stay sober a year and give me some kind of credit for something. But he was just like me. And I remember having a therapist that was real big on love yourself. Oh, jeez. She gave me this exercise. I was supposed to stand in front of a mirror and look myself in the eye and say over and over again, God loves me, God forgives me, God accepts me. I love me, I forgive me, I accept me. I could have said that till the planet blew up and it wouldn't change nothing. Because as I'm saying it, my head's going, bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. But I fell in love with that guy. And what I fell in love with is I'm not dancing. I fell in love with the me that is in him. An aspect of me that I could never love directly. I had to love it through you. And I think it's the way God loves us. He loves us through each other. One of the meditations I use sometimes, and it's just a simple little thing. It's I am the place where God shines through. Him and I are one, not two. I need not worry, fret, or plan, for he wants me where and as I am. And if I could be relaxed and free, he'll carry out his plan through me. And I like that. It corresponds very closely with the St. Francis prayer, make me a channel, that God works through us. I think God loves us all through each other. That's why there's a magical thing that happens in Alcoholics Anonymous when we go out of our way and inconvenience ourselves for the well-being of someone else. It's amazing. It heals things that I don't even know that need to be healed until they're healed. It healed the way I felt about myself and all my self-condemnation. Between step 12 and step 9, those are game changers for me. Changed the way I felt about myself. And so step 12 is the primary purpose, the number one thing. I run into guys all the time that just in the last couple months, I got a couple of them that are sober a long time. And they're in trouble. I mean trouble. Drinking, suicide kind of trouble coming at them. And they don't know what to do. I have one question I always ask. I always have several questions, but one of the questions I always ask them, how many new guys are you working with? And the answer is usually 0. I've been going to a detox. Las Vegas is a wonderful place to live. We call it the hitting bottom capital of the world. If you drink, if you have a lot of money and you're 30 years sober and you're worth a lot of money, and you drink again, Vegas will call you. And you end up on the streets there, and they end up in our detoxes. And over the years, I've made it sort of my business, not so much lately the last 5-6 years, but I did for a long time, of interviewing people and having a conversation with people who drank with various years of sobriety. Because I want to know, what didn't they do that they should have done, or what did they do that they shouldn't have done? Because I don't want to go down that street. And there's a lot of myths in Alcoholics Anonymous. One of the great myths is, well, the people drink again, so they stop going to meetings. That is often not the case at all. I know people that drank and went to 2 meetings the day they drank. Or there's people that say, well, he just must not have had God in his life anymore. That's not true either. I know people that were clergy that had more God actions in their life than I have, and they drank themselves to death. What's the common denominator? I wanted to know. I wanted to know what's the one thing that all these relapses have in common? Because I want to know what that is. And I discovered there's a question you can ask these people that were 30 years sober and drank again, 20 years sober and drank again, 10 years. Ask them this. Say, man, I am so sorry you drank again. I'd like to help. If you'll give me a list of the names and phone numbers of all the people in the first 90 days you've been working with, I'll step up. Give me a list of the commitments you have. I'll step up. I'll step in for you until you get out of here. They don't have anybody to give you. Because their primary purpose became themselves. They weren't helping anybody except themselves. When Wilson says nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics, that's why I stay in the game. And one of the nice things about doing 12-step work and doing detoxes and institutions is you see up close and personal what happens to guys just like me who stop doing this stuff. You see what happens to them. I don't know about you. I can't afford another relapse. I don't have another chance. Some people have chance. Some people can go in and out for a number of years. I don't have that. I did my in and out for a couple years, for many years, 7 years, 6 years, 7 years. When I tried to kill myself the last time, I know what waits for me. I pick up a drink, I'm dead. Quickly. Probably by my own hand. The fall from grace would be extreme. So I stay in the game. It's important for me to keep realizing that my primary purpose is my primary purpose. I went through a phase, I didn't even know it happened to me. By the time I think it started when I was probably 14, 15 years sober, somewhere in there, in the early to mid-teens. I started becoming very successful materially. And it kind of goes to your head. You don't mean to, but it does. And I started filling up with me. Didn't even know it. So gradually, my primary purpose to stop being the center of my life, stopped being trying to help drunks, and started being me. I became my primary purpose. And by the time I was 19 years sober, I was in trouble. I was depressed. I had everything I wanted and I didn't want any of it. You know what that's like? You got everything you got everything you want, you don't want any of it. And I was in trouble. And a guy in AA told me the truth. I think God speaks through people. I really believe that. That's why I go to a lot of meetings, because there's a covenant in Alcoholics Anonymous that when two or more of us come together for the purpose of recovery, God's in the midst. God speaks in AA. This ultimate authority will express itself through this consciousness of an AA group. Happens all the time. Happens to this day. If I can pull my head out of my butt and just listen, God will talk to me. Sometimes he's telling me new stuff. Sometimes he's just reminding me of stuff that I kind of knew but sort of forgot. When I hear you talk about your experience, I go, oh yeah, that's me too. I make that connection. So I went to this meeting. I was depressed. I was not doing very well. And there was a guy there, and he said to me, I told him how I felt. I said, I'm doing horrible. I feel really depressed. And he said, you still go to meetings, not as many as you used to, but you still go to meetings, and you run your mouth a lot in AA. And he said, you want the bragging rights of being a member. He said, but I don't think your primary purpose is helping God's kids anymore. I think your primary purpose is you. It was true. I didn't like hearing it. But it was true. And it snapped to me. I got scared. I thought, oh my God, I could drink here. I could drink again. And I started throwing myself back into service, only this time mindfully, and this time with an enthusiasm. I wasn't just checking the boxes, because you can just check the boxes and nothing really good comes from that. But if you check them long enough, maybe. And if you show up in AA long enough, maybe God will intervene and something will happen to you and you'll get back on track. And that's what had happened to me. And I got back on track. And I try to do a lot. I try to do a lot of 12-step work. I sponsor a lot of guys, and not because I'm an altruistic great guy. It's just that they relieve me of the bondage of self. Because as my sponsor Clancy used to say, when this craphead is thinking about that craphead, he's not thinking about this craphead. And that's really true. Relieve me of the bondage of self. And I think it's through step 12 where that happens. So sometimes when I come to an event in AA, I think, what if I could leave one thing here, just one thing? It wouldn't be a profundity. What it would be was an encouragement that maybe I could light a fire under one or two people, and maybe you'd start doing 12-step work and service in AA that you weren't doing before. I run into guys every once in a while, they don't sponsor anybody, and they're depressed. Well, of course you are. And I've said this to a couple guys. I said, so I'd like you to start sponsoring people. Oh, I don't sponsor people. That's not my niche. I thought, what does that mean? It's not your niche. He said, well, I had one guy tell me, I sponsored a couple guys, none of them stayed sober. So I just make coffee, set the chairs up. Well, that's good, but it's not the same. I said, you got to start sponsor guys. And they don't want to do it. And I said, you worked with 3 people and they drank again, and you've come to the conclusion that that's not your niche. Is that correct? He said, yes. So I have to tell him the story of Bill Wilson. December 15th, 1934, Bill Wilson got out of the detox for the last time. There's no AA, there's no sponsor, there's no book, there's no meetings, there's nothing except a conviction that he might be able to stay sober and keep this spiritual thing going on inside himself if he started helping people. And so from December 15th, 1934 to May 10th, 1935, less than 5 months, Bill Wilson worked with 96 failures. Nobody got sober. One guy committed suicide in their house on Clinton Street. Another guy stole his suit that he used for job interviews, and it's nothing. And then it was a work in progress. In his last, before he met Dr. Bob, he had his last conversation with Dr. Silkworth, and Dr. Silkworth set him straight. What you're doing is good, kid, but you gotta back off the religious aspect of this. You can't bring an alcoholic to God until you tenderize him with hopelessness first. All right? And that's what, when Dr. Bob showed up, and Bill didn't talk to Dr. Bob about God. Bill Wilson talked to Dr. Bob about Bill Wilson. And Bill Wilson's drinking. And that thing happened that happened to me in 1978 in a detox when I listened to my first sponsor share. You sit there and you nod your head. I'm like this guy. I'm like this guy. And out of that, if he's doing better than I am, then there's some hope that maybe if I did what he did, maybe what happened to him could happen to me. And I think that's all I think we are dispensers of experiential hope to hopeless people. We show you. I think sometimes step 12 is, having had a spiritual awakening as the only result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics, and it says and practice. I think it could say as we practice these principles in our affairs. Because one of the strongest things we can do is to be a good example. I get more from what you do than from what you say. I'm a show me guy. And so one of the strongest things we can do in Alcoholics Anonymous is to try to be a good example. That's why When I go to my home group, I'm not on my phone in the group because I'm sober a long time. If I'm texting people and doing things like that in the meeting, what I'm saying to the newer people. I think it's okay you all do this. Well, I don't believe that, but that's the example I'm setting. If I come in late, what I'm really saying to all the newer people, it's okay, come in late. And they will too. They'll go, Bob comes in late. I think the strongest thing we do here is we sacrifice a little bit. We inconvenience ourselves a little bit so that we could be a good example to others. One of the most powerful things we can do is be a good example. And I'm not always a great example. Sometimes I'm better than others. You know my wife is a great example. She's better. There's certain things in AA she's better at than I am. You know, I know, and I know this 100%, when I go to my home group, when I go to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, I am there to help the new people. I'm not there to buddy up with my friends and sponsees. I'm there to look for new people. And I know that, and yet I get caught up talking to my friends and my sponsees. My wife goes into the meeting, and it's like an arrow shot out of a bow towards the new people. She's just on them. I'd like to be a little more like that. Because that's evidence. That's an example. And what a great example that is for the other women in our home group. I think everything that we do of any value is to each one teaches one by being one. And I've learned from people. My first sponsor, he wasn't much of a talker. I mean, he shared. He was good, pretty good sharing, I guess. But man, if you watched him, he was a say yes to everything that needed to be done in AA. He just said yes. He pushed me into service and 12-step work and general service, intergroup service, like when I was pretty new. And I hope I never forget this. I was in my first area assembly. I was a new GSR. Must have been 1979, maybe, or maybe 80. I don't know. My first area assembly. And I'm there, and there was a trustee who talked that Saturday night. And he said something I've never forgotten. He said in his experience, 5% of the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous did 95% of the service and 12-step work. And then he went on to say that 5%, as long as they remain a 5%er, they never drink again. And how true that has been in my experience. The servants get it all here. And as long as you can remain the guy who's a giver here, the givers get, and the servants are served. And so I'll never forget that. I thought, man, as long as I stay that guy that just keeps saying yes and willing to do the stuff that I don't feel like doing, because some of it's inconvenient. I'm telling you, there's nights I when I go to West Care with my sponsee John, and I just hang out, do nothing, play with the dogs. I get these amazing dogs. But I go. And I go because I don't want to be a bad example to John. And I go because every time I do something in AA I don't feel like doing, I get something really good comes from it. Isn't it? It's a funny thing, isn't it? Have you ever had the experience of somebody wants to meet you at a meeting and you don't like that? I don't like that meeting. I don't like the people there. It's a stupid meeting. And you go to it because you said you would. And you come out of it going, man, that was one of the best meetings I've ever been to. Right? It's like God's constantly reminding me, you don't know crap. Just do. Don't think. Don't judge. Just do. And this is a program of doing. It's a program of action. So if I can leave one thing, if I could leave a spark here with just one or two people that maybe you turn up the volume on your 12-step work. Maybe you turn up the volume on your service in Alcoholics Anonymous. Maybe you turn up the volume on what kind of an example you are to the newer people, because a lot of good can come from that. I think we're done for the day. Thank you for listening.